I never planned to work for Tiger Woods. My career path had been in hospitality management, high-end resorts and luxury properties, until the pandemic decimated the industry and left me scrambling for employment. When a former colleague mentioned a confidential job opening for an estate manager at a prominent residence in Jupiter Island, Florida, I applied with modest expectations. The vetting process was intense. 3 rounds of interviews, extensive background checks, and finally a stack of non-disclosure agreements that would make a Pentagon official nervous. Only during the final interview did the identity of my potential employer become clear. "This position is at the residence of Mr. Tiger Woods," said the stone-faced hiring manager, studying my reaction carefully. "Discretion is not just preferred, it's mandatory. His privacy has been violated enough." I maintained my professional composure despite the internal shock. Tiger Woods, 14-time major champion at that time, global icon, and subject of one of the most public downfalls in sports history. The man whose spectacular collapse had been documented in excruciating detail. The Thanksgiving night car crash, the parade of mistresses, the painfully awkward public apology, the divorce, the injuries, the DUI arrest with the haunting mugshot that had been plastered across the internet. "Mr. Woods values 3 things above all else," continued the manager: privacy, efficiency, and excellence. The household must run with absolute precision. Problems are solved before they reach him, and nothing, absolutely nothing, about what you see or hear leaves the property. I nodded my understanding, signing the final documents. "One last thing," she added, her expression softening slightly. "This isn't the Tiger Woods from Thetabloids or even from the broadcasts. He's been through hell, some deserved, some not. What you'll witness is a man in the process of rebuilding himself. Remember that." 2 weeks later, I drove through the discreet security gates of the oceanfront estate that would become my workplace for the next year. I had no idea that I was about to witness one of the most remarkable comebacks in sports history from the inside. Not the public narrative of redemption packaged for consumption, but the raw, unfiltered daily reality of a man climbing out of an abyss he had largely created for himself. What I would learn about resilience, obsessive dedication, and the reconstruction of a shattered identity would change my understanding of human potential forever. Chapter 2. The property. My first impression of Tiger Woods' estate wasn't what I expected. While undeniably luxurious, the 9,700 square foot oceanfront property felt more functional than ostentatious. The media had often portrayed Woods as living in excessive opulence, but what I found instead was a meticulously designed environment built around specific purposes: recovery, practice, privacy, and family. The most striking feature wasn't the main house, but the 3.5-acre backyard complex, which included a 4-hole golf practice facility with different turfs and surfaces, a lap pool, a diving pool, a tennis basketball court, and a gym that would make professional sports teams envious. This wasn't showcased luxury, it was a purpose-built training compound. On my first morning, the head of household staff, an efficient woman named Monica, who had been with Tiger for over a decade, gave me the orientation tour. The residence operates on Mr. Woods' schedule, which revolves around his training, treatment, and time with his children when they're here, she explained, leading me through state-of-the-art kitchen facilities. His days begin early and follow strict routines. Your role is to ensure those routines proceed without friction or interruption. As we walked, she pointed out specific requirements: exact temperature settings that varied by room, precise specifications for food preparation, protocols for scheduling, and systems for maintaining absolute privacy. Everything was documented in detailed manuals that left nothing to interpretation. "Mr. Woods believes that excellence in the big things requires perfection in the small things," Monica continued. "You'll find he notices details others miss." We approached a locked door that required both a key card and a PIN code. "This is Mr. Woods' personal gym and recovery space," she said. "Only authorized personnel are permitted inside when he's using it, which is several hours each day." Through the glass panels, I glimpsed what looked less like a home gym and more like a sports medicine facility. Advanced equipment, therapeutic devices, monitoring systems, and technology I didn't recognize. This is where most of the real work happens, Monica said quietly. What people see on television, the tournaments, the comeback, it's just the visible tip of an enormous invisible iceberg. As we completed the tour at my office space, Monica handed me a detailed schedule. Mr. Woods will return from physical therapy at 1:30 p.m. He'll expect a complete briefing on household operations at 2:00 p.m. Be prepared, he'll have questions you haven't anticipated. Left alone, I studied the schedule for the coming week. What immediately struck me was the precision, not just hour by hour, but in 15-minute increments. Each day was a carefully orchestrated symphony of physical training, medical treatments, practice sessions, recovery protocols, business meetings, and family time. There were no gaps, no downtime, noun-structured hours. This wasn't the schedule of someone clinging to past glory or enjoying retirement. This was the regimen of a man on a mission, methodical, disciplined, and utterly focused on specific objectives. As I would soon discover, what happened within the boundaries of this property wasn't just physical rehabilitation. It was the systematic reconstruction of a human being. Piece by painstaking. Peace. Chapter 3. First Encounters. My first meeting with Tiger Woods didn't go as expected. I had prepared a comprehensive briefing about household operations, anticipating questions about staffing, schedules, and logistics. Instead, after brief introductions, he fixed me with an intense, evaluating gaze. "Tell me about your systems," he said. "Systems?" I repeated, momentarily confused. "Your organizational systems. How do you track details? How do you ensure nothing falls through cracks? How do you measure effectiveness?" Each question came rapidly, precisely, like a surgeon probing for specific information. I explained my methods, digital tracking systems, redundancy protocols, evaluation metrics, growing increasingly aware that this wasn't casual interest. He was assessing whether my standards aligned with his. "Good," he nodded finally. "Success isn't accidental. It's systematic. I don't need people who work hard. I need people who work smart within proven systems." This first interaction revealed something. The public narratives about Tiger often missed. Behind the athletic prowess and the scandal headlines was an intensely analytical mind, methodical, process-oriented, and detail-obsessed. During those early weeks, I observed Tiger primarily from a professional distance. He was unfailingly polite, but reserved, focused intensely on his rehabilitation and training. His days followed the precise schedule I had been given with rare deviations. AM. Wake up 6 aoi ahanyip akafoins. 7:30. M. Gym session, strength and conditioning. 7:30, 8:30. Breakfast and physical therapy. 8:30, 11:30. AM. Golf practice, specific technical elements. 11:30. 1:30 p.m. Medical treatments and lunch. 1:30. 3:30 p.m. Business meetings or additional therapy. 5:30 p.m. Second golf practice session. Course, simulation. 5:30, 7 Joali p.m. Recovery protocols, ice baths, massage, etc. 8:30 p.m. Dinner and family time when children present. 10 p.m. Review of practice data, planning for next day. 10 p.m. Sleep. What struck me most was the isolation. Despite his global fame, Tiger's daily life was remarkably solitary. His interactions were limited to a small circle: coaches, medical team, close friends, business associates, his children when they visited, and household staff. There was no entourage, no parade of celebrities or hangers-on. This wasn't the glittering celebrity lifestyle portrayed in media narratives. This was more like a monk's existence, disciplined, focused, and largely removed from the outside world's distractions. One evening, about 3 weeks after I started, I was working late in my office when Tiger passed by, returning from his recovery session. He paused in the doorway. "You're still here," he observed. "Not a question, just an acknowledgement." Yes, sir. Finalizing the logistics for tomorrow's medical team visit. He nodded, then asked something unexpected. Do you golf? I've played, but I wouldn't call myself a golfer, I admitted. A hint of a smile crossed his face. Good answer. Most people claim to be better than they are. He turned to leave, then added, The staff dining room has those protein bars I like. Help yourself if you're working late. Long days require proper fuel. It was a small gesture, but revealing a glimpse of consideration that contradicted the self-absorbed image often portrayed in the media. Over the coming months, these small moments would accumulate into a more complex picture of a man the public only thought they knew. But the most revealing insights would come not from direct interactions, but from observing the invisible process that was unfolding every day within the walls of the estate, a process of reconstruction so methodical and so comprehensive that it would challenge everything I thought I understood about human resilience. Chapter 4. The Invisible Obsession. By my second month managing Tiger's estate, I had settled into the rhythm of the household. My primary responsibilities included coordinating staff, managing schedules, overseeing property maintenance, and ensuring that the complex machines surrounding Tiger's rehabilitation and training operated without friction. This position gave me a unique vantage point to observe what wasn't visible to the outside world, the painstaking process happening behind the scenes as Tiger worked toward what many considered impossible. Returning to competitive golf after multiple back surgeries, personal scandals, and a body that physicians had essentially declared broken beyond repair. What I witnessed wasn't just physical rehabilitation. It was an obsession so comprehensive and methodical that it bordered on the pathological, except that it was producing results that defied medical expectations. The first layer of this obsession was data. Everything in Tiger's training was measured, recorded, and analyzed with scientific precision. One morning, I entered his study to deliver some documents and found him surrounded by spreadsheets and graphs, not financial reports, as I initially assumed, but detailed tracking of his own biometric information. These numbers tell the truth, he said, noticing my glance at the monitors. Feelings lie. Perceptions lie. Data doesn't. His training was guided by a comprehensive tracking system that monitored everything: sleep quality, recovery metrics, blood markers, swing mechanics, putting stroke consistency, pressure distribution in his footwear, spinal alignment during rotation. Hundreds of data points collected daily and analyzed for patterns and insights. The second layer was the team. While Tiger's comeback appeared from the outside as a solo journey, it was supported by an elite group of specialists: physical therapists, swing coaches, strength trainers, nutritionists, pain management experts, each among the best in their fields. Their work was coordinated with military precision, each contributing to specific aspects of their construction project. What surprised me was how Tiger engaged with these experts. Despite his reputation for stubbornness in these interactions, he was primarily a student, asking questions, taking notes, seeking to understand not just what to do, but why and how each element contributed to the whole. He didn't want followers or yes men. He wanted teachers who could help him rebuild himself from first principles. The third and most striking layer was the mental reconstruction. One evening, I was working late when Tiger's mental performance coach arrived for their regular session. Their meeting room door was slightly ajar, and as I passed, I overheard fragments of their conversation. "The old identity is gone," the coach was saying. "You can't be who you were. That person doesn't exist anymore, physically or otherwise." "I know," Tiger replied, his voice devoid of self-pity. "But defining the new identity can't just be theoretical. It has to be built through action, through proving what's still possible." This wasn't sports psychology, as I had understood it, visualization exercises, or confidence-building techniques. This was something deeper: the methodical reconstruction of a shattered self-concept, rebuilding an identity from the ground up after both body and public persona had catastrophically failed. Later that week, I observed another dimension of this process. Tiger maintained a strict regimen of ice baths, 10 excruciating minutes in water just above freezing, as part of his recovery protocol. Most people would grimace, curse, or display some reaction to the extreme discomfort. Tiger would sit completely, still his face betraying nothing, sometimes even reviewing technical documents during the sessions. When I once commented on this ability to manage discomfort, his response was illuminating. Pain is information, not an enemy. Fighting it creates tension. Tension creates compensation, patterns. Compensation creates new injuries. He paused, then added something I would never forget. The comeback isn't about overcoming pain. It's about rebuilding a relationship with it, understanding what it's telling you without becoming its victim. This philosophy extended beyond physical pain to the mental and emotional dimensions of his recovery. Tiger wasn't running from the wreckage of his past, the public humiliation, the broken marriage, the shattered body. He was methodically examining each piece, extracting lessons, and incorporating them into the new foundation he was building. Most revealing were the late hours. Long after most of the household staff had departed, Tiger would often be found in his study, reviewing not just the day's training data, but footage of his old swing, books on biomechanics, or research papers on sports medicine, teaching himself to become an expert in his own reconstruction. This wasn't the behavior of someone desperately clinging to past glory or seeking redemption in the public eye. This was something far more substantive, a master craftsman meticulously rebuilding his craft from first principles with a patience and attention to detail that few would have the discipline to maintain, especially with no guarantee of success. What the public would eventually see as a miraculous comeback was, from my vantage point, the inevitable outcome of the most comprehensive and obsessively detailed reconstruction process imaginable, an invisible obsession happening daily behind the privacy of these walls. Chapter 5. The physical battle at the core of Tiger's comeback was a physical reality that few outside his inner circle fully understood. His body was, by conventional medical wisdom, fundamentally broken. This wasn't just about recovering from injuries. It was about engineering functionality in a system that specialists had essentially declared beyond repair. By my third month managing the estate, I had become more directly involved in coordinating the complex medical and training apparatus surrounding Tiger. This gave me a clearer window into the true nature of the physical challenge he faced. One morning, I was reviewing the schedule for an upcoming series of specialist appointments when Tiger's head physical therapist arrived earlier than expected. Finding me alone in the scheduling office, he took the opportunity to explain something. "I need you to understand the actual situation so you can prioritize properly," he said, his expression serious. "What Tiger is attempting shouldn't be physically possible. His spine has been fused. He's had 4 major back surgeries. The rotational forces required for a professional golf swing are precisely what his surgical team warned would cause catastrophic damage." He showed me medical imaging of Tiger's back, the hardware, the fused vertebrae, the compromised discs, and compared it to the biomechanical requirements of a golf swing. "When surgeons say someone will never play professional golf again, it's usually hyperbole," he continued. "With Tiger, it was a straightforward mechanical assessment. The structure simply shouldn't be capable of producing and withstanding the necessary forces." This context transformed my understanding of what I was witnessing daily. Tiger wasn't just rehabilitating, he was essentially attempting to engineer a new physical reality, finding ways to generate power and precision from a compromised system that, according to conventional wisdom, simply couldn't produce what was required. The approach was methodical to the point of obsession. Each morning began with what Tiger called activation, not just a warm-up, but a precise sequence of movements designed to engage specific muscle groups in a particular order, compensating for structural limitations with enhanced neuromuscular control. I once observed this process while delivering some urgent documents to the gym. For 45 minutes, Tiger performed what looked like minutely controlled micro-movements, often using resistance bands, focusing intensely on muscle engagement patterns that were nearly imperceptible to an observer. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was approximate. Each movement was executed with surgical precision. "Most people think training is about what you do," he explained when he noticed my presence. "At this stage, it's really about how you sequence the system, teaching the body to distribute force through viable pathways when the primary ones are compromised." This same methodical approach extended to every aspect of his physical preparation. His diet was precisely calibrated, not just in terms of macronutrients, but timing, combinations, and specific ingredients selected for anti-inflammatory properties. Sleep was monitored with advanced technology to optimize recovery. Environmental factors, from room temperature to light exposure, were controlled to enhance physical regeneration. Most revealing was Tiger's relationship with pain. Unlike many athletes who adopt a push-through-it mentality, Tiger had developed what his team called pain intelligence, a sophisticated understanding of different pain signals and appropriate responses to each. There's mechanical pain, inflammatory pain, neural pain, and compensatory pain, his pain management specialist explained during a team meeting I was coordinating. Each requires a different approach. Ignoring these distinctions is what ends comebacks before they start. I witnessed this distinction in practice. There were days when Tiger would immediately terminate a particular exercise at the first hint of a specific pain signature, while on other days he would work through considerable discomfort with no concern. To an outside observer, this might appear inconsistent. To those who understood his methodology, it reflected a sophisticated diagnostic approach to his own body's signals. The most striking aspect of this physical reconstruction was Tiger's involvement in the process. He wasn't simply following expert instructions, he had educated himself to an extraordinary degree. His office contained medical textbooks on spinal, biomechanics, neuromuscular rehabilitation, and pain science, many heavily annotated in his handwriting. During treatment sessions, he would engage his specialists in detailed technical discussions, sometimes challenging their approaches or suggesting modifications based on his own research and body awareness. This wasn't the behavior of a typical patient, it was the approach of someone who had made himself an expert in his own reconstruction. One evening, I found Tiger in his study reviewing slow-motion footage of his swing, comparing it frame by frame, with videos from different eras of his career. "See this position at impact," he said, unexpectedly engaging me in the analysis. "In 2000, my spine could create this angle naturally. Now, I need to generate the same position through a completely different mechanical sequence, using hip rotation and forearm pronation to compensate for what the fused segments can't do." He spoke with the precision of an engineer, not a typical athlete. This wasn't just physical rehabilitation. It was a fundamental redesign of the machine, finding ways to produce the same output through radically different mechanical processes. What became increasingly clear was that Tiger's physical comeback wasn't based on healing in the conventional sense. The damage was, in many ways, permanent. His approach wasn't to restore what was lost, but to build something new within the constraints of his new reality. A different way of generating power, a different way of creating precision, a different relationship with his physical self. The public would eventually see the results, the swing, the tournaments, the comeback. What they couldn't see was that this visible performance was being generated by an entirely different physical system than the one that had dominated golf in earlier years, a system built through thousands of hours of invisible, painstaking reconstruction. Chapter 6. The Mental Reconstruction. By my 5th month at the estate, I had been gradually entrusted with greater responsibilities in coordinating Tiger's complex daily operations. This included more direct involvement with his business affairs, media relations, and the strategic planning of his comeback attempts. This proximity gave me unprecedented insight into perhaps the most crucial aspect of his return, the complete reconstruction of his mental approach. What I observed wasn't the sports psychology typically associated with elite athletes. This was something far more fundamental, the methodical rebuilding of an identity and mindset that had been shattered as completely as his physical body. The process became visible to me through 3 key dimensions I witnessed regularly. The first was Tiger's relationship with his past. One afternoon, I entered his office to discuss some scheduling matters and found him watching footage, not of golf, but of his own public apology press conference from years earlier, after the infidelity. Scandal had erupted. He was taking notes, his expression clinical and detached. "Most people never watch themselves at their worst moments," he said, noticing my discomfort. But that's where the real information is. This wasn't self-punishment or rumination. It was analysis, studying the person he had been with the same objective precision he applied to his golf swing mechanics. Over time, I realized that Tiger regularly revisited his failures, both public and private, not to dwell on them, but to extract actionable insights about patterns of thought and behavior that had led to collapse. You can't outrun your shadow, he explained once when I asked about this practice. Either you turn and face it, understand it, and integrate it, or it chases you forever. The second dimension was his systematic approach to mental training. Just as his physical rehabilitation followed precise protocols, Tiger's mental preparation adhered to specific systems. Each day included dedicated periods for what he called cognitive work, structured exercises in focus, emotional regulation, and decision-making under pressure. I once observed him working with his mental performance coach on a particularly revealing exercise. They had created a simulated high-pressure putting scenario, but with a twist. The coach would deliberately introduce disruptive comments about Tiger's past failures, personal issues, or physical limitations at precisely timed moments during his preparation, routine. The trigger isn't the problem, the coach explained when they finished. It's the gap between trigger and response where mastery lives. Tiger nodded. Half-second delay. Recognize, recenter, refocus. Still losing about 15%. Efficiency when the personal triggers hit. They discussed adjustments to the protocol with the same detailed precision engineers might use to fine-tune an aircraft engine. This wasn't pop psychology or motivational thinking. It was cognitive training as rigorous and systematized as any physical regimen. The third dimension, and perhaps most profound, was Tiger's reconstruction of his fundamental identity. This became apparent through a concept he referenced often in meetings with his team. Tiger Woods 2.0, version 1.0 operated with physical capabilities that no longer exist, he explained during a strategy session I was documenting. He also operated with psychological blind spots that proved catastrophic. Version 2.0 doesn't have the same raw materials to work with, physically or reputationally, but has the advantage of experience and perspective that 1.0 never possessed. This wasn't metaphorical language, it was a concrete framework through which Tiger was systematically rebuilding his approach to golf, business, public life, and personal relationships. He spoke about his former self in the third person, not as a psychological quirk, but as a deliberate distancing mechanism, creating space to retain useful elements while discarding what had failed. Most revealing was a conversation I overheard between Tiger and his longtime friend and mentor, Mark O'Meara, who had visited the estate during my 6th month. The hardest part isn't the physical pain, Tiger admitted in a rare moment of vulnerability. It's accepting that I'll never be that guy again, the one who dominated through physical superiority, finding motivation when you know your best days, by certain metrics, are behind you. So why continue? O'Meara asked. Because there's more than one way to define best, Tiger replied. Version 1.0 had physical gifts, but competed primarily from fear. Fear of failure, fear of not living up to expectations, fear of being found out as an imposter. There was never satisfaction, just temporary relief from anxiety. He paused before continuing. Version 2.0 has physical limitations, but can compete from a different source, from pure love of the challenge itself, from appreciation for the opportunity, from a complete understanding of the craft. The question that drives me now isn't can. I dominate, but how masterfully can I play with the tools I have left? This philosophical shift wasn't simply positive thinking. It was a fundamental reconstruction of purpose and identity, finding new sources of meaning and motivation when the old ones had been removed either by physical limitation or life circumstance. The mental reconstruction I witnessed wasn't about returning to form. It was about creating an entirely new form, building a different relationship with competition, public perception, personal worth, and the game itself. Tiger wasn't trying to recapture who he had been. He was methodically creating who he might become, using the hard-earned wisdom from his collapse as building material for the new foundation. This insight transformed my understanding of resilience itself. What I was witnessing wasn't just an athlete's comeback. It was a masterclass in human reinvention, the creation of a new self from the rubble of the old, with full integration of the painful lessons that the destruction had taught. Chapter 7. The Private Struggle. 7 months into managing Tiger's estate, I witnessed something few outside his innermost circle ever saw: the raw, unfiltered struggle that occurred behind the carefully managed publicimage. While sports media crafted narratives about his comeback, alternating between heroic redemption stories and skeptical dismissals, the reality playing out daily within the estate's walls was far more complex and human. The physical pain was constant. Despite carefully crafted public statements about his recovery progress, the private reality was that Tiger lived with a level of daily discomfort that would render most people non-functional. I regularly coordinated with his pain management team, scheduling treatments, arranging for specialists, ensuring medications were precisely administered. One morning, I arrived early to prepare for a busy day and found Tiger already in the kitchen, moving with particular stiffness. He had been scheduled for rest, but clearly hadn't slept. "Bad night," he said simply, seeing my concerned glance. "Sometimes the nerve pain flares, nothing to be done except wait it out." Despite this, his training session was set to begin in 20 minutes, and he had no intention of cancelling. This wasn't bravado or unhealthy stoicism. It was part of a carefully managed approach to his condition. His medical team had determined that certain types of movement were beneficial even during pain flares, while others would exacerbate the issue. What impressed me most was Tiger's relationship with this reality. There was no complaint, no seeking of sympathy, no dramatization of his suffering. He approached pain with the same analytical mindset he brought to every other aspect of his comeback, as a variable to be managed, understood, and worked within, rather than an enemy to be defeated. "The mistake most people make with chronic pain," he once explained during a conversation with his physical therapist that I overheard, "is believing there's a finish line, a point where it's completely resolved. For some conditions, that's not realistic. The goal isn't elimination, it's management and functionality despite its presence." This philosophy extended beyond physical pain to the emotional dimensions of his comeback journey. There were setbacks, tournaments where his body failed him, days when progress reversed, moments when the mountain seemed too steep to climb. These weren't hidden from his team, but they were processed privately. One such moment occurred after a particularly disappointing performance at a tournament he'd entered as a testing ground for his recovery. I was working late in my office when Tiger returned to the estate, earlier than expected. Through my open door, I saw him walk slowly to his study, moving like a man twice his age. Hours later, as I was preparing to leave, I noticed his light still on. Concerned, I knocked gently, using the pretext of confirming the next day's schedule. What I found wasn't the dejection I had expected, but Tiger surrounded by technical data from the tournament, swing analytics, physical metrics, performance patterns, methodically analyzing what had gone wrong. "Today was actually valuable," he said, noticing my surprise at his demeanor. "Clear evidence of which elements are progressing and which need reassessment, better to know now than at Augusta." This wasn't denial or toxic positivity. The disappointment was real. I could see it in the tension he carried. But he had developed a system for processing setbacks that transformed them from emotional defeats into technical problems with potential solutions. Perhaps the most revealing glimpse into Tiger's private struggle came through his relationship with his children. When they visited the estate, his entire demeanor shifted. The intensity remained, but it was channeled differently, focused on being fully present despite whatever physical discomfort or competitive pressure he was managing. One evening, I overheard a conversation between Tiger and his daughter Sam that particularly struck me. She had asked him directly about something she had seen online about his past mistakes. "Did you really mess up as bad as people say?" she asked, with the direct honesty only children possess. Tiger was quiet for a moment before answering. "Yes, I made serious mistakes that hurt people who didn't deserve it, including you and Charlie, and those mistakes cost me a lot, including the chance to see you both every day." "Are you still that person?" she asked. "Parts of me will always be that person. he replied thoughtfully. We don't just erase who we've been, but I work every day to strengthen the better parts and to understand the destructive parts so they don't control me anymore. It was the most vulnerable I had ever heard him. There was no spin, no minimization, no defense, just honest acknowledgement and evidence of deep reflection. This wasn't the scripted public apology from years earlier. It was the hard-earned wisdom of someone who had faced his darkest aspects and was engaged in the ongoing work of integration. In these private moments, away from cameras and commentators, I witnessed the true nature of Tiger's comeback journey. It wasn't the clean, inspiring narrative of triumph over adversity that would eventually be told by sports media. It was messier, more nuanced, a daily negotiation with physical limitations, past failures, and uncertain outcomes. The real heroism wasn't in the eventual victories that the world would celebrate. It was in this private persistence, the willingness to engage with brutal realities without surrender, to extract meaning from suffering, to rebuild identity from the ground up when it would have been far easier to retreat into comfortable retirement and trade on past glories. What made Tiger's comeback remarkable wasn't that he overcame adversity, it was that he embraced it as his most valuable teacher. Chapter 8. The System. Behind the comeback, by my 8th month managing Tiger's estate, I had developed a comprehensive understanding of what distinguished his approach from typical comeback attempts. While the public narrative often focused on his determination and mental toughness, qualities he certainly possessed, what I witnessed daily was something more structured and sophisticated, a complete system for human reinvention. This system had 5 interconnected components that worked together with remarkable synergy. The first was what Tiger called radical objectivity, a relentless commitment to seeing his situation without emotional distortion or self-deception. This wasn't just positive thinking. It was the disciplined practice of separating facts from feelings, assessments from attachments. One morning, I observed this principle in action during a performance review meeting with Hai's entire team. Tiger had just returned from a disappointing practice round where his body had failed to perform as expected. Rather than avoiding the uncomfortable reality, he began the meeting by stating, "Yesterday's performance indicates we're overestimating my current rotational capacity by approximately 50%. The data doesn't support our timeline. We need to recalibrate expectations and adjust the progression model accordingly." There was no frustration, no defensiveness, just clear-eyed acceptance of what the evidence was showing, regardless of how unwelcome that information might be. This wasn't defeatism. It was strategic realism that allowed for effective adaptation rather than persistent denial. The second component was Tiger's micro-progression approach to improvement. Rather than focusing on distant outcomes, his system broke every aspect of his comeback into the smallest possible increments, creating a path of tiny, achievable steps rather than overwhelming leaps. His practice journals revealed this methodology in action. While most golfers might work, generally on improving their putting, Tiger's notes included entries like left hand, grip pressure during stroke, reduced tension by 7% compared to yesterday, still 12% above optimal baseline, identified trigger, point at transition from backswing to forward stroke, implemented 3-breath protocol before initiating movement. Results: variability reduced by 4% across 50 attempts. Continue protocol with focus on maintaining relaxation through impact point. This level of granularity transformed the daunting mountain of comeback into thousands of manageable steps, each one providing measurable feedback and the psychological reward of incremental progress. The third element was what his team called failure integration, a systematic approach to SPACs that differed radically from typical sports psychology. Rather than quickly moving past disappointments with positive affirmations, Tiger had developed a detailed protocol for extracting maximum value from every failure. This protocol included specific questions to be answered after any setback. What precisely went wrong? Specific mechanics, decisions, or preparations? What information does this provide that wasn't previously available? How does this adjust our understanding of current capabilities? What immediate modifications can be implemented based on this information? What longer-term adjustments to the development system are indicated? I once witnessed Tiger and his team conduct this analysis after a particularly frustrating training session where his body simply wouldn't cooperate with what his mind intended. The discussion wasn't emotional or discouraged, it was methodical and almost clinically detached, as though they were discussing an engineering problem rather than a personal disappointment. The fourth component was Tiger's identity evolution framework, a structured approach toward defining himself beyond the limitations of his past self-concept. This wasn't vague self-help, it was a concrete methodology for building a new relationship with his sport, his public persona, and his personal worth. Key to this framework was what Tiger called capability-independent value, identifying sources of meaning and worth that didn't depend on performance metrics or public perception. His journals contained regular reflections on questions like, what aspects of my craft do I value that are still fully available to me regardless of physical limitations? What contributions can I make to golf that don't require dominance or victory? What personal qualities emerged through adversity that weren't developed during success? The fifth and perhaps most crucial element was Tiger's compound system, the recognition that physical, mental, technical, and philosophical dimensions of his comeback weren't separate tracks, but a single integrated whole. Every decision considered, multiple layers of impact. For example, when evaluating a potential swing modification, the analysis wasn't limited to technical effectiveness. The team would simultaneously consider biomechanical impact on long-term joint health, psychological sustainability, under pressure energy expenditure and recovery requirements, compatibility with core identity and values, scalability across different physical condition states. This multidimensional approach prevented the common comeback pitfall of solving one problem while creating three others, ensuring that progress was genuine and sustainable rather than illusory and fragile. What made this system extraordinary wasn't just its comprehensiveness, but its personalization. This wasn't a generic formula applied to Tiger's situation. It was a custom-built methodology designed specifically around his unique circumstances, limitations, and objectives. Most revealing was how Tiger's team documented and refined this system. In his private office was a constantly evolving manual. Hundreds of pages detailing every aspect of the comeback methodology, updated regularly based on new evidence and outcomes. This wasn't just a collection of techniques, it was a living document of human reinvention being written in real time. During a rare moment of direct conversation about this system, Tiger explained its genesis. When everything falls apart completely, body, career, reputation, identity, you face a choice. You can try to randomly pick up the pieces and glue them back together, or you can study the breakdown and design something new and better from what you've learned. Most comeback attempts fail because they're trying to restore what was lost instead of building something different with what remains. This insight crystallized what I had been witnessing. Tiger wasn't trying to become Tiger Woods again, at least not the version the world had known. He was using the hard-earned wisdom from his collapse to engineer an entirely new model of himself, one built to function within his new realities while incorporating the painful lessons of his journey. The comeback that the world would eventually witness wasn't the result of simple determination or physical talent. It was the product of this invisible system, a comprehensive methodology for human reconstruction that was being refined daily behind the privacy of the estate's walls. Chapter 9. The Hidden Purpose. As my time managing Tiger's estate extended past the 9-month mark, I began noticing patterns suggesting that his comeback pursuit served a purpose beyond what was publicly understood. While media narratives framed his return as either the quest for more championships or the need to redeem his legacy, what I observed suggested something more profound was driving him. The first clue came through Tiger's evolving relationship with his children. While he had always been a dedicated father, I noticed increasing integration between his parenting approach and his comeback journey. He wasn't separating these domains, he was deliberately using his struggle as a teaching tool. One Sunday afternoon, his son Charlie was visiting and had become frustrated while practicing golf in the backyard facility. After several failed attempts at a particular shot, Charlie threw his club, not violently, but with the unmistakable expression of surrender. Tiger, who had been watching from a distance, approached him calmly. "That feeling you have right now," he said, sitting beside his son, "that's the exact feeling I have some days when my body won't do what my mind knows it should." What followed wasn't a lecture about proper behavior or sports psychology techniques. Instead, Tiger guided Charlie through the same systematic approach to frustration that he used himself, identifying the precise source of difficulty, breaking it down into manageable components, separating emotional reaction from technical analysis. "The club throwing isn't the real problem," he explained gently. "It's a symptom of feeling helpless. But you're never actually helpless as long as you can. Think clearly about what's happening." I realized then that Tiger wasn't just teaching his son how to play golf. He was transmitting a methodology for handling adversity that he had developed through his own painful journey. A legacy of resilience more valuable than any trophy or record. This pattern extended beyond his children to a small group of younger golfers who occasionally received invitations to train at the facility. These weren't high-profile teaching sessions announced to the media. They were private mentorship interactions that Tiger specifically requested not be publicized. During these sessions, I noticed that Tiger spent relatively little time on technical instruction. Instead, he focused on guiding these young athletes through his analytical frameworks, teaching them how to think about their development, how to process setbacks, how to build sustainable systems rather than chasing quick results. "Most talents fail not from lack of ability, but from lack of methodology," I overheard him telling Owen, promising junior golfer. "Natural gifts without a system to channel them eventually hit limitations they don't have the tools to overcome." The most revealing glimpse into Tiger's hidden purpose came through a conversation I accidentally witnessed between him and his longtime agent, Mark Steinberg. They were discussing long-term strategy in Tiger's study when I arrived to deliver some urgent documents. "The public narrative doesn't matter," Tiger was saying as I approached the open door. "Whether they frame it as redemption or comeback or whatever story they need to tell, that's for them, not me." "Then what is it for you?" Steinberg asked. "After everything you've been through, all the pain, why put yourself through this when you have nothing left to prove?" Tiger was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because the method is what matters now. The biggest impact I can have isn't winning again, though I believe I will. It's documenting and demonstrating a complete system for coming back from complete disaster." He gestured to the bookshelves lining his study, filled with journals, data analyses, and the comprehensive documentation of his reconstruction process. "Most people who reach the bottom never find a way back because they don't have a methodology, just motivation or desperation. Everything we're doing, the data, the systems, the frameworks, it's all building something larger than another victory or another championship." "You're creating a blueprint," Steinberg said, understanding dawning in his voice. "Exactly. A transferable system for human reinvention, proven through the most public collapse and tested under the most intense scrutiny. My situation is extreme, but the principles are universal." I quietly withdrew before they noticed me, but this conversation transformed my understanding of what I was witnessing. Tiger's comeback wasn't ultimately about golf at all. The sport was simply the arena where the methodology was being tested and refined, the visible manifestation of a much larger purpose. This insight explained so much about Tiger's approach: the meticulous documentation, the systematic analysis, the philosophical framing of each aspect of the journey. He wasn't just trying to resurrect his career. He was creating a comprehensive roadmap for others facing their own versions of rock bottom, a distillation of wisdom extracted from his own devastating experience. The public would eventually see the competitive results, the return to major championships, the miraculous win at Augusta, but they would remain largely unaware of this deeper purpose, the creation of a transferable system for human reinvention built from the hardest lessons of Tiger's life and tested through the crucible of his comeback journey. In this light, whether Tiger won another major championship or not was almost beside the point. The true achievement was the methodology itself, a blueprint for rising from complete devastation that would outlast any sporting achievement and potentially help countless others navigate their own personal collapses. Chapter 10. The understanding, in my final month working at Tiger's estate, the full significance of what I had witnessed crystallized through a series of events that brought everything into focus. While the world was beginning to see glimpses of Tiger's competitive resurgence, I had been granted a perspective on something far more meaningful than a sports comeback. The catalyst was Tiger's preparation for the Masters tournament, the event that had defined many of the highest moments of his career. As the tournament approached, the atmosphere in the household shifted. The methodical daily work continued, but with a sharpened focus and intensity. What struck me most was Tiger's emotional state during this preparation. There was determination, certainly, but not the grim, driven quality that characterized his earlier career. There was something else present, a quality I can only describe as appreciation mixed with perspective. One evening, about 2 weeks before the tournament, I found Tiger in his study reviewing course's strategy notes. Noticing me at the door with some scheduling questions, he invited me in. Our conversation turned unexpectedly reflective. A year ago, I couldn't tie my own shoes without pain, he said, gazing at the course maps spread across his desk. Couldn't get out of bed without help some days. The idea of competing at Augusta again seemed impossible. He paused, then continued with surprising candor. People think this comeback is about proving something to others. It's not. It's about answering a question for myself. What's possible when you rebuild from absolute zero, using everything you've learned from failure? In that moment, I understood that Tiger's journey wasn't ultimately about reclaiming past glory. It was about testing the limits of human reinvention, using his own broken body and shattered reputation as the laboratory for an experiment in extreme resilience. This understanding deepened through an interaction I witnessed between Tiger and his physical therapy team during final preparations. They were discussing pain management strategies for the tournament when Tiger made a statement that captured the essence of his transformation. Before, I believed suffering was something to overcome through force of will, he explained. Now I understand its information to be integrated. The pain isn't my enemy, it's my most honest teacher. This wasn't spiritual platitude. It was practical philosophy distilled from lived experience, a fundamental shift in relationship to adversity that had implications far beyond sport. The most revealing moment came just days before Tiger was to leave for Augusta. Late one evening, as most of the household staff had departed, I needed to confirm some details about his travel arrangements. Finding his office empty, I checked the practice facility and discovered him, sitting alone in the half-light, not practicing, but simply looking out at the collection of flags marking various greens. Not wanting to interrupt what seemed like a private moment, I began to withdraw, but he had already noticed me. "Come sit for a minute," he said, gesturing to a chair nearby. It was an unusual invitation. Tiger generally maintained professional boundaries with staff. For several minutes, we sat in comfortable silence before he spoke. "You've been here almost a year now. You've seen the process from the inside." I nodded, uncertain where the conversation was heading. "What's your biggest takeaway from what you've observed?" he asked with genuine curiosity. Carefully considering my response, I answered with what had become increasingly clear to me. That what appears to be talent from the outside is actually methodology on the inside. That coming back from the bottom isn't about summoning some mysterious inner strength, it's about building systems that make progress inevitable, even when motivation and confidence are absent. Tiger studied me for a moment, then nodded with unexpected approval. Exactly. Most people are waiting for motivation or inspiration to strike like lightning. But lasting transformation doesn't work that way. It's built through systems that convert daily actions into compound results. He gestured toward the practice facility around us. All of this, the analytics, the progression models, the feedback loops, it's just making visible what was always invisible about mastery. The real work isn't what happens on Tournament Sunday. It's what happens in the thousands of private moments, when no one is watching and nothing spectacular seems to be occurring. As our conversation concluded and I prepared to leave, Tiger offered one final reflection that encapsulated everything I had witnessed during my time at the estate. rock bottom. Stripped everything away, the physical gifts, the aura of invincibility, the identity I'd built my life around. But it also offered something invaluable, the chance to rebuild from first principles, to distinguish what was essential from what was incidental. He looked out at the practice green, dimly visible in the evening light. The trophies and records were never the point. They were just evidence that the method was working. The real achievement was the method itself, and that's something that can never be taken away, even if I never win again. In that moment, I understood the true nature of Tiger's comeback. It wasn't a desperate grasp at former glory or an attempt to rewrite his legacy. It was the natural expression of someone who'd discovered something profound through devastating failure, a comprehensive methodology for human reinvention that transcended golf entirely. Weeks later, as my employment concluded, I watched along with the rest of the world as Tiger achieved what many had deemed impossible: victory at the Masters, his first major championship in 11 years. The public narrative immediately framed it as a redemption story, a triumph of the human spirit, a legendary comeback. But having witnessed the process from the inside, I understood that the visible victory was merely the tip of an enormous invisible iceberg, the final visible evidence of a transformation that had occurred far from public view, built through thousands of unglamorous moments of methodical reconstruction. What looked like talent reborn was actually system rewarded. What appeared as sudden resurrection was the final stage of meticulous rebuilding. What seemed like the return of natural gifts was actually the triumph of deliberate methodology over seemingly impossible limitations. Tiger's journey from rock bottom wasn't a story about the return of greatness. It was a masterclass in how greatness is actually constructed, not through mysterious talent or dramatic moments of inspiration, but through the patient application of system, method, and principle, day after invisible day. And that, perhaps, is the most valuable lesson of all, that our moments of greatest devastation can, with the right approach, become the foundation for our most meaningful contributions, not despite our failures, but precisely because of what they teach us about the true nature of human possibility.